Welcome to Buffalo Rumblings Live. My name is Matt Warren. I am here with Sal Capaccio from WGR 550 in Buffalo. And Sal is the Buffalo Bills beat reporter for WGR, and we haven't had you on since you got that promotion. So congratulations, Sal. We're glad to have you on the beat. You're certainly providing great insights, and that's why you're on today.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. That's my goal, actually, to provide enough insight that you ask me to come on this show.
Oh, well, I mean, lofty goals, lofty goals. No, that's the Bills have had a very interesting offseason. There's been a lot of upheaval, and we haven't been on air since the draft, where we did a whole lot leading up to the draft on our videos with a bunch of scouts and stuff like that. So we haven't had a whole lot to talk about with Rex Ryan and Greg Roman and all the rest of the brand new Bills, both on and on the field and behind the scenes. So why don't we start with Rex Ryan? What have you noticed about Rex that's been different than, say, OTAs you watched with Doug Marrone or other practices you watched under old head coaches?
Well, what's different is what's been even surprising to me. He is, he's very hands-on, energetic, in the camera all the time. He's always out there. But at practice, he's not like that at all. He's actually quite the opposite. He's in the background. You don't notice him. I found myself saying sometimes, "Where's Rex?" We have to look for him and point him out. Not like Doug Marrone, who, let's face it, got involved in drills. He became the center, he became the tackle, and he would do things, and he'd be all over the place. And you'll see Rex walk around once in a while, but usually what he's doing is he'll walk up to his assistant coaches. They'll have conversations about what's going on privately. You don't hear those, but he's definitely a guy that likes to delegate his practices to his assistant coaches and lets them do their work, whereas Doug Marrone was a lot more hands-on during these practices. I find that interesting because their personalities are kind of different in that regard, and they're actually the opposite of both those things.
I wonder if that's, and this is all speculation, of course, but if that's something he learned from his first go-around, like let your players play, let your coaches coach, and kind of manage. And that's one thing that Doug Marrone may have had a problem with, keeping his hands off certain parts of the team. But of course, Rex is going to be calling the plays for the defense. Mm-hmm. So he's going to have to be involved in some way, shape, or form, at least on that side of the ball. As far as Greg Roman's concerned, what have you noticed about Greg Roman and running the offensive plays, other than the fact that they're running two different 11-on-11s in two different sides of the field?
Well, pretty much the same thing. He's a delegator. He lets his offensive line, his offensive assistants really do their work. Aaron Kromer is a really hands-on coach, and you can watch him work with the offensive line. And Greg Roman kind of, oversees everything. He watches what's going on there. He watches what's going on with the quarterbacks. He watches what's going on with the wide receivers and tight ends. But he's not a guy that's really involved in every aspect of it hands-on. He likes to go and watch everything that's happening. And then when they get to the 11-on-11 work, that's when he gets a lot more involved. That's when he's in the huddle a little bit. He's talking with guys. You'll hear his voice once in a while, tell somebody you lined up wrong or, whatever. Make sure you check something here or there. He lets the play through, and then he'll coach a little bit afterwards. But again, he's a guy that comes from the school of, I'm going to let my assistants do their work. And when it comes time for me to speak up, I'll speak up. But as long as everybody's on the same page, I know everything's going to get done.
So as far as installing the offense or seeing, what kind of new things are you seeing out of Greg Roman's offense?
A lot of motion. They have a lot of motion. I think that's one of the very first things you notice when you're out there. They really like to move the tight end around a lot, but I'll say that with a caveat. There's usually two tight ends on the field. One of them will kind of stay where he is. The other one will move either wide, come in as a slot guy. They'll motion the tight end to an H-back position a lot, depending on which tight end is on the field. You'll see a wide receivers go in motion a lot. So that's one difference. The other difference is you just never know what you're going to get. They'll do a lot of 12 personnel, one running back, two tight ends, and then they'll come back with double tight ends and a pair of running backs and a fullback back, basically. So you're always getting a variation of formations. I think that's one of the things that kind of strikes me is how many different formations they run, and all the players talk about that as well, Matt. They talk about how many formations there are out there, how much they have to really digest as far as the playbook is concerned before the snap of the ball even.
I'm Matt Warren, and I'm joined tonight by Sal Capaccio from WGR 550 in Buffalo, who's been out at Bills, OTAs, and the mandatory minicamp. And that last question came from one of our readers, Griff, who posted that in the comments section, and also asked, he's been noticing a lot of pitch plays to the running back in the practice highlights. Have you noticed more of that as opposed to, running CJ Spiller off the guard?
No, let me tell you how they do it. So you probably with that question, you probably saw highlights from a certain day that they basically ran toss sweep that whole day. So what happens is the way practice has gone, the way I've noticed is before they go to 11 on 11, when the offense gets together and just runs their offensive teamwork with no offensive line, or I should say with an offensive line, but no defense, they have run pretty much one play, a variation of ways every single day. For example, the first day that I watched them, again, toss sweep. It was toss sweep right, toss sweep left, toss sweep right, toss sweep left. And then they do it with tight ends. They do it with fullbacks. They had the quarterback leading a couple of times, which was crazy. Tyrod Taylor would pitch it, and he would run around the end, and he would lead block. But they just ran toss sweep every different way imaginable. The next day, we go out there, and they run every screen pass imaginable. They ran it to the receivers. They ran it to the tight end. They ran it to the H-back. They ran it to the running backs. They go left. They go right. They go middle. So what you probably saw in that session, in that highlight session, was the one day they worked on a lot of toss sweep. So they're pretty much using installation period as a period to go over one specific play to get really good and rep that play a lot. And they put that together then when they go to 11 on 11, and then they bring out the whole repertoire, essentially.
And that's why we have you on, Sal Capaccio, giving us the nitty-gritty of Bill's practices. That's exactly what was happening. Okay, so we're kind of burying the lead here, talking about Rex Ryan and Greg Roman and the offense and stuff. What's going on at the quarterback position? Everybody seems to think that, you know, the world is ending and the Bills are going to be a one-win team because their quarterback play has been horrible. What's going on at OTAs and minicamp at the quarterback position?
Well, I think it's important that we all kind of just take a step back, take a deep breath, and realize that this is a three-man competition. There's nobody that is going to just step up and be head and shoulders above everybody else right now. And if that happened, that would be great, Matt. But I think that we're all fooling ourselves if we thought that would happen. We have to give this time to play out. They're not getting enough reps as one guy to be able to separate themselves. And as much as you hear that they're not performing well or they're inconsistent, that is all true. But at the same time, there are a lot of factors at play. A, they're working on a brand new offense. B, they don't have the same receivers on the field that you're necessarily going to be. I mean, Sammy Watkins isn't out there. Percy Harvin hasn't been there. And C, again, I'll go back to, you don't have enough time and enough reps. You're in there for a few plays, and other guys in there, you're not getting the bulk of snaps. And then, of course, you're going against a Rex Ryan coach defense and the elite front four that they have. I'm not trying to make excuses. All I'm trying to tell you is, yes, there are concerns, but I think we're jumping a little ahead of ourselves to say that the sky is falling and everything is horrible. Let's see how all this plays out once they get pads on, once they have the full offense installed, once they start having a full complement of wide receivers and everybody else on the field. From what I've seen, Matt Castle has been the most inconsistent of the group as far as guys I thought would be the least inconsistent. I thought he would be the guy that'd be more steady. You wouldn't get the big stuff out of him, but you wouldn't get the horrible stuff. He's kind of been all over the place. Tyrod Taylor, he's not necessarily been really, really consistent, but when you watch him, you think, okay, there are certain things you can do with this guy, especially in the Rex Roman defense, their offense. They're going to be really good, but you also understand that he's going to probably make mistakes if you put him out there because he makes several of them, you know, in practice, throwing the ball to the other team or being inaccurate or things like that. EJ Manuel, boy, he might be the most frustrating guy because every once in a while he'll have a day like he did on Thursday as they left the last day, where you go, that's why they drafted him in the first round. I mean, he just looks like a first-round quarterback. He's doing everything right. And they'll have another day, almost maybe in succession or right before that, where he looks like a guy that doesn't belong in an NFL football field. So, you know, the inconsistency has been the worst part of it, but I don't think that we all need to completely panic right now. They're trying to make sure that these guys are in a system and insulated where they don't have to make mistakes. And right now they're being exposed to making those mistakes because of the way practices are run and the way that the defense is so far ahead of the offense.
Well, I was going to ask you about that. And you just mentioned EJ Manuel was very, very good on Thursday, the final day of the minicamp. It's also the day that Rex Ryan rested all of his defensive starters, correct? Like they were. So you're going against
only the defensive line. He only rested the defensive line. The linebackers were out there in the secondary, but that's a caveat. The secondary, the starters, Gilmore, McKelvin haven't been out there essentially the whole time. So not that he rested them, they weren't there. Aaron Williams hasn't been out there. So I guess the only real true starters he was going against were the linebackers. You know, Preston and Nigel were out there, but yeah, he did rest the defensive line.
So Florida Bills fan 77, you answered his question about which QB is winning the competition so far. He wanted us to compare around the league. I would think that the Bills are in the bottom 5 or 6 as far as quarterback situations go. I always keep looking over at the Jets and being like, okay, I guess it's not that bad. Or, there's a couple other teams that you think it could be kind of like that at the quarterback position. Has EJ's, this is from Hornell Fred, has EJ's attitude changed at all from last year?
Yes.
Or at least from what you've seen in practice and then after practice talking to the media? Go ahead.
Yes, it's really interesting. I really like the way his attitude's changed now. I don't know if that's going to translate in him being a better quarterback when it's all said and done. I don't know if that means he'll be a starter in this league, but I at least appreciate this, that EJ's going to go down swinging. And what I mean is, you remember Matt last year when he was benched and then he was asked a lot about what are you going to do differently when you get out there? What was his answer? I'm going to let it rip. I'm going to let it fly. I'm just going to be myself. I'm not going to worry about, playing too conservative or being overcoached or however he put it. We all kind of know what he meant, the way he was coached by that coaching staff. He's done that. I think he's done exactly what he says he was going to do, which is he's taking more chances. He admitted that to me specifically. I asked him, there was a play, not during the mandatory session, but the week, it was actually mandatory. It was the Tuesday. That was the first day they were inside. There was a play where there was a double A gap blitz coming at him. He recognized, he called an audible at the line. Marcus Easley was split out wide. He takes about a 3-step drop and he just launches one to Easley as the rush is coming, threads it perfectly between the corner and the safety coming over the top. Easley takes it for a touchdown. The very next play, he throws a post to Chris Hogan. It's not a great pass, but the DB made a bad play, tipped it up in the air, and Hogan caught it for a touchdown. Well, afterwards, I asked him about those two plays and the first one specifically, and he said something interesting. He said, I took chances and I threw a ball that I don't think I would have thrown last year. And I agree with that. He took chances and really said, I'm going to go, what do I have to lose here? At least he's going down fighting. He might not win this job. He might not be the quarterback that he was drafted to be. But when it's all said and done, we're not going to go say it's because the coaching staff held him back. It's going to be because EJ Manuel wasn't good enough. And I do see that attitude change about him. And I appreciate it. And I think that he needed to have that attitude change to give himself a fighting chance.
And that might have been the biggest thing he learned the entire year from Kyle Orton, a guy that had to be a little bit reckless, so to speak, had to take some of those chances just to get by. I don't really want to talk about the running back situation and LaShawn McCoy and stuff like that when they don't have pads on and nobody can tackle them and things like that. But as far as the running back situation, what's been your take on whether it's the rotations through, the pecking order, things like that? What have you found interesting about the running backs?
Well, two things. Number one, I think that as we've gone on through this process, Fred Jackson is solidifying himself more and more as the true number 2 guy. I think there were some questions about if he would be the number 2 guy. He is going to be 35 years old. He is the oldest running back in the league, and he's the oldest Buffalo Bills player. And there were rumblings that he would not be on this roster just a few months ago. But I think he is solidifying himself as the number 2 guy. Did we ever really doubt that Fred Jackson would do that, right? Considering who he is and what he's done and how he is every year, that guy who just shows up when it's time to play. The other thing is Bryce Brown, I know that he had his coach call him out publicly, and I know that he started off behind the 8 ball. What I wanted to see out of Bryce Brown was someone who was fighting for his spot on an NFL football team. I haven't seen that. And that's kind of disappointing to me, and it's surprising to me. Maybe his heart just isn't in it because he's been put in another situation where he's just buried, and his whole career he's been in that situation where he actually has some talent, but everywhere he goes, it seems like he's behind somebody, and then they do more to put him even behind more people. So I just don't see Bryce Brown coming out of this running back competition as a guy who sticks on the 53-man roster. I think he's the odd man out. I think right now it's clear that he is the guy that's not going to be there unless there's an injury in front of them, unless they feel Carlos Williams just isn't ready to play. I think Carlos Williams stays on the team because of his special teams duties. He'll be a guy they use in special teams. I like the way he moves in the hole. He's a one-cut guy. It's really interesting to watch. Just watch him get in the hole, one cut downhill. It's really nice, but he's not quite ready to carry the ball in the NFL yet. I think that he's going to be a special teams guy that they mold into that role.
Quickly, let's talk about the tight end position. Dan Lavoie, one of our contributors here at BuffaloRumblings.com, wonders if anyone's making a strong case for that second tight end spot. There's been, as you mentioned already before, they're using a little bit of motion to get him in the H-back position. They're splitting him out wide sometimes and things like that. But Charles Clay is going to be the number one. What about Marquise Gray, Chris Gregg, and Nick O'Leary?
Well, I think, and you're leaving a guy out. His name is Clay Burton. He is an undrafted free agent out of Florida. And the reason I bring that up, Matt, is because he really has, just like everyone else, pretty much got the same amount of reps with the first team, the second team. And I say that because Charles Clay's always with the first team. And, once in a while he'll get a break. But they bring those other guys in, and every one of them, whether it's Gray, whether it's Gregg, whether it's O'Leary, whether it's Burton, they're all getting a shot. Now, they have a new guy, too, and his name is Mulligan. He was signed right after the last practice. We haven't seen him yet. We'll see how he contributes to the mix. This is a fascinating battle to me, to be quite honest. It's one of the ones I'm watching really closely at camp. It looks like maybe towards the end of camp there was a little separation, then Burton was falling down a little bit, but I still think he has a fighting chance to make this roster, and specifically because I don't know if Chris Gregg is the kind of player that fits into Greg Roman's offense. He's very stiff. He's not the kind of guy that can be versatile. Greg Roman wants versatile tight ends. Look who they got rid of. They got rid of Scott Chandler and Lee Smith. One-trick ponies, essentially. Scott Chandler, your catching tight end. Lee Smith, your blocking tight end. What did they do? They brought in Charles Clay, who's a guy who can play every down, block, and catch. They brought in Marquise Gray, who's a phenomenal athlete who can basically be physical. He can be an H-back. He can go out. He can be a tight end. He can do those things. Nick O'Leary was voted the best tight end in college football, yet he's more of a blocker for the Buffalo Bills right now. So this is a really interesting battle that's going to go on. I think they might keep 4 tight ends, so we need to keep an eye on that.
Again, we keep bearing the lead, and we haven't talked about the wide receiver rotation. We know Sammy Watkins is going to be the number one guy come whenever he's healthy, and he hasn't been taking very many snaps in the spring at all. So it's kind of hard to get a sense of where stuff is shaking out because the number one guy isn't there. But among the guys that are past Sammy Watkins, what kind of things are you seeing? It's hard to develop a rapport when there's 3 quarterbacks rotating through. And I think that was what kept Chris Hogan on the field so much last year was he had a great rapport with Kyle Orton. What are we seeing from Percy Harvin? What are you seeing from the other wide receivers that are kind of fighting in that, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 spots all down there past Sammy Watkins?
Well, I just did a article today on whose arrow's up, whose arrow's down at WGR550.com. And I listed Chris Hogan as his arrow up because he really has taken good advantage of Sammy being out. Now, of course, you'd love to have Sammy out there, but since he isn't out there, you have Robert Woods basically as the number 1 and Chris Hogan as the number 2. They've been the guys lining up as the starting receivers, and every time I look up, Chris Hogan's beating somebody. He's open, he's catching the ball, he runs great routes. Rex Ryan specifically mentioned him as a guy that's a really big leader in the offseason and the workout program and things like that. They really like him. I think he stepped up. He's going to have a role on this team. Marquise Goodwin has also had a chance to take advantage of Percy Harvin not being there a few times. Percy missed some OTA work, voluntary stuff, and they like Marquise Goodwin. He actually has had a very good spring here, so I think he's going to be in the mix to fight for that job. A lot of people assume that Percy and Marquise Goodwin are pretty much the same guy, so why keep them both? I don't assume that necessarily. Percy Harvin's also here, remember, to return kicks and to be a special teams guy. So when it comes time to him being on the field, I don't know how much you can count him as like the number 3 wide receiver. He might technically be the number 4 guy because the 3 guy is going to get a lot of snaps. And if you're using him as that special teams guy and the way he violently plays, I mean, he runs the ball violently when it's in his hands and, he really goes all out. I don't know if he's going to be a guy who can last all the time playing that many snaps. So I think Chris Hogan's the number 3 guy behind Sammy and Robert Woods. I think Marquise Goodwin still has a very legitimate shot to make this team. The guy that I think is really brought in that they thought would be more than what he is right now is Des Lewis, and that's not fair to him because he's been hurt. He hasn't been out there, but he hasn't had the reps to make an impression. And when they go to camp, I don't know how many chances he's going to have to make reps because Sammy's going to be out there. Then you have guys on the other end of the roster that are fighting to maybe be that last guy they hold over, whether it's a Justin Brown or an Andre Davis, Caleb Holly. They've all done nice things. There's going to be a battle if they keep that one extra wide receiver because we know Easley's going to stick. He's special teams. And Marcus Thigpen, I'm not so sure because they have Percy Harvin. I would expect him not to make the roster. But he's also a guy they use a lot in practice as a wide receiver, which I find interesting.
And that also goes back to the tight end conversation we were just having and the running back conversation. You can only keep so many of those guys. And
Right.
at some point, it's going to come down to, okay, we've got one from each position group that we might want to keep, but we only have one spot for them. So it's going to be interesting to see how that all shakes out a little bit later on. Let's look at the offensive line quickly, even though they're not obviously doing live padded practices and things like that. Can you tell our viewers here what exactly the offensive line is doing to separate themselves right now? Everyone's saying that John Miller is doing such a great job. Well, what's he doing a great job doing?
Well, number one, I think they drafted him hoping he could step up into a starting role, and they've given him every opportunity. And what he's done is he's gotten to handle the playbook like that. I mean, he never seems to be out of place. He always seems to be doing exactly what he's coached to be doing. The coaches talk about how smart he is. And let's remember, he started 4 years at Louisville. They say he was very well coached there. So he already has that knowledge base coming into the NFL, knowing kind of what it takes. He's been in those battles. He's not a guy that's raw. You don't need to develop him. And that's not a position that you really have to wait on if a guy is like that. There's been plenty of examples. We saw him here in Buffalo, Eric Wood, Landy Levitri. They started early on in their career. Remember, Eric was a guard when he first started. When he came into from college as well into the NFL, he played both positions, I should say. But anyway, that being said, that's one thing they're doing. The other one is there's really not a lot of competition pushing them. So you don't see a Cyril Richardson or a Chris Williams, obviously, who's not out there saying, hey, I want to take this job. I'm not saying John Miller or Richie Incognito are winning by default. They're not. But what they are doing is they're head and shoulders already above what they have at the position, and they're not playing poorly. They're not giving anyone a reason to take them out of the lineup. Offensive tackle now, Cyrus Kouandjio, you can see that there are changes in his game. I really like his conditioning. He's a very good athlete. His feet move very well. That's something they're going to take advantage of. His arm length is amazing. He was measured. I was looking today because Mario Williams said that that's one thing that really separates him is his arm length. He had the second longest arm length at the combine last year, 35 3/8 inches when he has his arm length. He's out there. That's pretty crazy, right? And when you watch him, if he gets his hands on you first, Matt, you can't really get around him because he's just going to move his feet and he's going to keep you at bay. The thing he has to work on, though, is upper body strength. If you can get into Cyrus Kouandjio, he can be overpowered by a more powerful pass rusher. Now, if you have Mario Williams going against him every single day, if every Sunday he had to go against Mario, he'd be in trouble. Mario just has the full package. He's got arm length. He's got speed. He's got strength. Well, luckily, he won't be going against Mario every single Sunday. But if he gets against somebody that's a really powerful rusher that gets his hands on him first, he's going to be in trouble. Otherwise, I like his arm length. I like his footwork. I like his conditioning. And Shawn Trell Henderson just simply has not done enough from a reliability standpoint to be at practice. And then when he's on the field to show that he can take charge of that job that was his going into camp. And I think that's why Cyrus has separated himself.
Well, we'd heard a little bit about those rumblings that you were mentioning about his conditioning. Is that really what was holding him back his rookie year, his entire time?
I don't think so. I think that was a little bit of it. I think that was part of it. I also think that Shawn Trell came in just as a better football player right away. You know, Shawn Trell, remember, he was a 7th-round draft pick, but he was also a guy that was maybe first-round talent that had a lot of off-field issues. So once they decided that that was the case, and then they moved him to guard, remember, he just didn't have the necessary technicalities to work at the guard position. I think he's more suited to play tackle in the NFL. I say he's a good athlete, but, you know, he's got that arm length. He's got the tackle specifications, I think, that you want. I just don't think he ever really fit in a Doug Marrone offense. And once it got to a point where maybe last year around mid-camp where he wasn't necessarily taking a hold of what they wanted from a conditioning standpoint or a technical standpoint, it becomes a point of no return. You have to get the season started. You know, you got to get who in there who you want, and then there's just limited reps. Then they played with his position a lot. I think the kid was really messed up by having too many coaches trying to coach him, being switched on his position, not having the right conditioning coming into camp. So a lot of things were working against him. Some of those things I think that have really he's really corrected and improved upon that are going to help him this year.
One of the things that you were talking about, John Miller, is that he was picking up the playbook really quickly. Is Cyrus Kouandjio doing that even though he's in his second offense in 2 years? Was his head ever a concern?
No, I don't think so. You talking about Cyrus here?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I don't think his head was a concern. I think that, well, if you ask the last coaching staff now, the answer might be different, Matt. They might say, well, he didn't pick up what we wanted. But I think that's on them for putting him in different positions as a rookie and never really giving him an opportunity to stay in one spot where he could learn everything. I think his head was spinning. And again, I'll go back to, we all know this, you know, they had 5 guys essentially coaching the O-line, it seemed like last year. You're getting taught one thing, and then the next day you're teaching another thing. And you never gave the kid, I think, a chance to settle into a role, where now he's finally settling into a role. And although, I'm not telling you that Cyrus Kouandjio has played at a Pro Bowl level at all these practices, I think he at least is settled in. He's more confident. He feels more comfortable at what he's doing. And I think that goes a long way in what you need to play any position in the National Football League.
So you just said 5 offensive line coaches telling him what to do, and then this offseason he goes and works with LaCharles Bentley, and now he's got a brand new offensive line coach with Aaron Krober, and a new assistant offensive line coach with, I don't remember his name, but I'm just saying that's a lot of people to be listening to. But
all the time,
I believe you if you're saying that he's doing fine. So earlier this offseason, actually, even recently, there's been a lot of talk about Cordy Glenn not being what the Bills want. And Dan Lavoie again asks, do you buy into what's going on, some of the chatter around Cordy Glenn? Is Shawn Trell Henderson really a threat to take over his left tackle job either this year or when Glenn's contract expires? Are they going to offer him a contract extension? I know there's a lot there, but
well, let me
go.
Yeah, no, that's all right. Let me start with, I think that coming into camp, there may have been concerns where is Cordy Glenn's conditioning? I think that was an issue with him a little bit last year. Remember, he missed a lot of camp last year because he had an illness and he had a medical situation. So he missed a lot of that. He did not have a very good year last year. You watch on tape. So here you have a brand new coaching staff evaluating on just what they see on tape. So, they're probably going to think, we don't know if we necessarily have the guy. As camp has gone on, as practices have gone on, I think that Cordy Glenn's conditioning has shown up really well. He came in shape. He came in doing exactly what he's supposed to be doing. And then they realized that he's a pretty good football player. And maybe last year, because he didn't have that time in camp, was the biggest reason and detriment towards him not having a very good year. So I think he solidified himself there. And then on top of that, the Shawn Trell Henderson issue. Here's a guy that I think they hoped and wanted to push Cordy Glenn and wanted to push Cyrus Kouandjio. They wanted those 3 guys to battle for 2 different spots. And a few weeks ago, they were. And then Shawn Trell Henderson misses some OTA time. And then Shawn Trell Henderson misses a mandatory minicamp. Well, you can't battle for positions when you're missing time. And now Shawn Trell Henderson has a lot of ground to make up. So Cordy Glenn's firmly entrenched at left tackle. It looks like Cyrus Kouandjio's firmly entrenched at right tackle, at least for the time being going into camp. Now down the road, I don't see how they can pay Cordy Glenn. They have a lot of contracts coming up, as Bills fans know. You got to pay Marcel Darius. Nigel Bradham is coming up. Who's the other one? I'm missing one. Stephon Gilmore. Yeah, that's right. Now that's another year down the road, but you're going to want to make sure you have those parameters and keep him, especially with Rex Ryan and that defense that you're going to want to play him in and how valuable he's going to be. Cordy Glenn cannot be paid as a franchise left tackle. And traditionally, this is an organization that does not do that. They don't believe in that philosophy, paying offensive linemen boatloads of money, and especially franchise-type money at the left tackle or even guard spot, which is why they let Andy Levitre go. So if Cordy Glenn wants to get paid, which I'm sure he does, I think he's going to have to get paid somewhere else once his contract ends after this year.
Okay. Is that speculation or is that something you're hearing?
It's speculation based on pretty good evidence of how this organization has operated in the past. I have not heard anybody say we're not going to pay Cordy Glenn. Not at all. I have not heard anybody say anything about that we're going to pay Nigel Bradham. I mean, for all I know, 5 weeks into the season, they may feel that Nigel's not playing up to what they feel in the defense and Cordy Glenn's playing great, and they decide we got to pay this guy. I mean, that could happen. I'm just going on past, philosophies of the organization and how they normally prioritize guys and how they fit in the structure of the offense and the defense. You do have a guy in Shawn Trell Henderson that, given another year, if he does what he's supposed to do, yeah, I think this organization would like to move him to the left side or Cyrus Kouandjio to the left side and put Shawn Trell at right and have those tackles going forward, for the next several years.
Interesting. We spent a lot of time talking about the offense, mainly because of the non-padded issues of the practice and the non-contact and stuff. But Sal Capaccio from WGR 550 in Buffalo, this defensive line is pretty good, right? That's the question.
It's really good. I wonder sometimes, Matt, like, when is it going to end? Like, well, how, that window closes quickly. And did we already see it? You never know. You go in one year and they're great. And then the next year you're like, oh, what happened? This window's not closing. It's really amazing that they are really that good. And what's most impressive to me is here's Marcel Darius, who's not playing first week. They plug in Corbin Bryant. They plug in Stephon Charles. They plug in Alex Carrington. It seems like these guys don't miss a beat because they just play so well together. They play off each other. And now they have a couple really good guys back in right behind them, and Nigel Bradham and Preston Brown. So, they are a very good defensive line. They're going to be very good again. No one's worried about that. It's going to be really interesting to see if they can continue to put up the same numbers, because sometimes those are products of, who you're playing against and the schemes that they're doing and things like that. But nobody has anything to worry about the defensive line. They're going to be just as good as advertised as usual.
Well, I like how you talked about the window closing. One of the big reasons that the window didn't close is that the Bills gave Kyle Williams an extension this offseason. They gave Jerry Hughes a big, fat contract extension this offseason, and they're going to give Marcel Darius a big, fat contract extension. They have the money under the cap to spend on it, and a lot of other teams don't because they have to pay, franchise quarterbacks and stuff like that. But the Bills don't have to worry about that, at least not yet.
The Bills are paying their franchise defensive line. I mean, that's what their philosophy is. Doug Willie's pretty much said that. He said, well, we can pay a franchise quarterback. We don't have one. Or we can pay the defensive line as our franchise players, and that's what they're doing.
And who can blame them?
That's right. That's right.
Looking behind them, and Preston Brown and Nigel Bradham are going to be steady. Hopefully, we know Brown's going into his second season and his second defense. Bradham's going into his fourth season and fourth different defensive coordinator. Pretty much anybody who's been with the Bills has been on a different defensive coordinator for every year for the last 6 years or something like that. And then taking a look back at the secondary, Aaron Williams has been out with an injury, so we're seeing a lot of Duke Williams and Corey Graham at safety. What's going on at that position right now?
Well, Corey Graham is a safety. I talked with Donnie Henderson at length after practice last week, and he told me that, he knows that Corey Graham can go to corner anytime he asks. If he says, I need you to go to corner, he can do it, which is why he wants him to play safety right now. He says he needs the reps. He wants him to get those reps in, because if he has to go to corner, he can do it. But if he starts off at corner, he has to go to safety. Now we're talking about, are you caught up? Do you have enough of a knowledge base to know what we want from you there? So that's good. I expect Corey Graham to stay there. Aaron Williams is an interesting case right now. Aaron Williams, we all know, is a really ascending player. He's an up-and-coming safety. They paid him a lot of money. He has not been on the field. He's been injured. He's been at the facility. He's a good leader. But, there's reps that are being missed here. There's a lot that goes into knowing what you're supposed to do, the communication aspect of the defense. And, even Donnie Henderson mentioned this when I talked to him a little bit, that, there's good news, bad news here. The good news is that with Aaron Williams out, he's had a chance to see, Duke Williams and Bakari Rambo and other guys step up and what they can do. But the bad news is he's missing valuable time. And when he comes back at training camp, hopefully he's healthy enough, he can catch up. And that's a little bit of a concern, he said, for him right now, which is interesting to watch. From the corner aspect, Stephon Gilmore is going to be just fine. He's going to be the number one guy. He's a little bit limited right now after some offseason stuff, but he should be good. Leotis McKelvin looks better and better. He is recovering from the ankle surgery. I think he's penciled in as the number one guy, but right now with him out, Ron Brooks and Ross Cockrell have been there. They've been pretty much the corners that have been on the outside. Ron Darby's been getting work there as well. I don't think they're going to trust the rookie to be in that position quite yet to make that leap as a starter. I don't like what I've seen necessarily from Cockrell. I think he gets beat a little bit too much in camp. I think Brooks has had a up and down camp. He's done some nice things. He's also been beaten. But again, you're talking about guys who are really second teamers when it's all said and done. And Nickel Roby, let's go back to 2 years ago. He had a phenomenal year under Mike Pettine's system. This scheme is very much conducive for what he does best. Even talking with him and Donnie Henderson, they both say he loves it because he's going to be able to blitz from the corner. He's going to be able to do some really good things that he hasn't been able to do. He wasn't able to do last year. So I think that's set right there. The secondary's in flux. I mean, they have some changes going on back there. The good news is for the secondary, they don't have to cover people very long because the front four and the front seven are going to get after the quarterback. And even Nickel Roby said to me, I don't have to go cover guys all the way down the field because that ball's coming out quick.
Yeah, and that was one of the hallmarks of the Pettin defense back a couple of years ago, which was nice. There's one person that people asked about in the comment section that I neglected to talk about back when we were on the offense. So let's wrap up with a little chat about Cyril Richardson. Is he doing anything that might make you think he might make this roster?
No, he could make the roster. I think that that's a different animal than starting. Obviously, they need offensive linemen. They need offensive line depth. Here's the thing with Cyril. If you go back and watch him on tape, I've watched him on tape. I've talked with people in the organization. Cyril is kind of the opposite of Cyrus Kwanjo, whereas Cyril, if you ask him to step forward and just go maul your man, he's pretty good at it. but he's not good at moving around. He's not really, if you do stunts and blitzes and things like that, I don't think it's a mental aspect. I just don't think that he's quite physically gifted enough to be able to go and, block the gap to his right and then the gap to his left and move around. He's not good. He's not really good enough to put in space. Now, he can get there. He can get better at those things, but he's more of a guy that you're going to want to be a mauler and a straight line blocker. If he has to step straight forward, if he has to just step right or left and he has to go hit somebody, he's just fine. But in this league, you can't do that. In this league, there's a lot of stunts. There's a lot of blitzes. There's a lot of things you got to pick up. And if you go watch him on film, the All-22 is great for him, but you just concentrate on Cyril a little bit when he's been in there. He really gets beat a lot to his left and to his right when he has to step out, when he has to make decisions quickly about where guys are coming from. So, I just said maybe it's not mental. Maybe it is a little bit because he's a little slow at it, but I see it more as a physical issue. But it could also be the fact that he's just not recognizing quick enough when things like that happen. So he just needs some time to develop. I think if you want to have him as a guy that can, do some things in short yardage situation, he's a guy that can help you. And I wouldn't just throw him away right now. I mean, he's a second-year guy. He needs time to develop. Look what happened with Cyrus here. Cyrus, his first year, just didn't see the field, and now he could be the starting right tackle. Looks like he is. So I don't think we should just throw him away quite yet, Cyril Richardson.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Sal Capaccio from WGR 550 in Buffalo. Sal is the Bills beat reporter for WGR, and you can follow him on Twitter at Sal Sports. He's been definitely one of the better Twitter follows during minicamp and OTAs as he sees things a little bit differently than others. Well, he might not see it differently, but at least he tweets it differently, and that's what makes it interesting. So thanks again, and you can always listen to him on WGR as well, both on their little radio app or their smartphone app, and then on the radio or online. So check him out at Sal Sports on Twitter, and thanks a lot, Sal.
Thanks a lot, man. Always appreciate being on with you guys and really love what you do. You bring a different element to everything, so it's really good to have this platform for. So thanks for having me, and hopefully we can do it sometime at training camp again.
Absolutely. Bye.
Thanks, guys.